There once used to be a time when the Detroit Lions were known as lovable losers, but this time has long been since past. However, though, as we get ready for 2024, the Lions are gunning for the NFL and to try to take over the NFL hierarchy. We're going to talk about it in this episode, folks, so don't you dare go away.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello, Detroit Lions fans, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So as we all know, folks, training camp for the Detroit Lions starts tomorrow. So this is going to be the last episode that I'm hopefully going to have to do that has absolutely nothing to do really with training camp or any official news that's officially coming out as far as, that's related to the Lions. So I'm thankful that this is probably going to be the last episode I have to do for like this for a while, but I figured this would be my last kind of like big bang episode to talk about something that, has something to do with the Lions, but is not realistically actual news, if that makes any sort of sense. So, when we think about the Detroit Lions for a very, very long time, as we all know, as Lions fans, we just were not good. We were not a very good team. We were not a very good organization. And the best way I can look at trying to describe this episode is looking at it from a historical perspective. Again, all of you guys that have watched my channel for years know that I have a history major. I am very much rooted in how history has shaped the worldview and how it has a tendency to repeat itself. Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Winston Churchill. He says, "History is written by the victors." Well, in the NFL, the victors have long been teams and organizations like the Chiefs as of recently, the Patriots from the 2000s and 2010s. The Steelers have also been mixed in there, the 49ers, and there's been a couple of other teams that have kind of dabbled a little bit in there. But you guys know who I'm talking about with these teams that have had a long-standing, rich history of success in the NFL. Those are teams that I like to call the victors. Well, many of these teams, like I said, they've been in this top conversation for the past 20, 30-something years. And some of them even longer than that. However, again, to kind of talk about history has also shown that eventually the old guard or whatever group that has been holding on to power for a very long time eventually gets replaced, and then somebody else takes over for that individual or that group, and then they become the new power. Well, again, like I was talking about with the Detroit Lions, over the last 2 decades, we were not a very good team. And I mean, for crying out loud, the evidence is literally out there. I had to take a look at this just so that way I had my numbers correct, but we already knew it to be true. From 2000 to 2020, the Detroit Lions were 119, 216, and 1 in terms of our overall record. We had a .356 win record. That's not good. In that time span, we also had only 5 winning seasons, which were in 2000, 2011, 2014, and 2016 and 17. We were the first team to go 0-16 in 2008. We had 0 playoff wins in that period of time. We only had 3 playoff appearances. And on top of that, we had 7 head coaches. That was tied for 5th most out of all other teams in that period of time. So again, not a very good organization, not a very good team. The evidence is plainly there in black and white. Now, if we also want to understand this, it wasn't just the fact that we had a bad team. We had bad coaching. We had bad management. It was bad from top to bottom. And that was observed, like I just pointed out, with the product that was observed on the field. And everybody knew it. However, again, kind of going back to the historical perspective that I've introduced here, a bedrock principle of history, a bedrock principle of life is that nothing remains stagnant. Things change. And whether it's done quickly or slowly, things will change. Well, for the Detroit Lions in 2021, that was when things officially started changing for the Detroit Lions. And it was done over, as we already know, over the last 3 years. And I'm going to try and sum it up as very quickly as I possibly can here. But there was a 3-step process that, made this change possible. The first thing that was changed was that the team had to fix their management team. Well, okay, how did they do that? Well, Sheila became the one that was in charge. She became the new owner. She then brought in guys like Chris Spielman, and then Chris Spielman along with Barry Sanders and Rod Wood, they all got together and they then hired Brad Holmes, who became the general manager. Once they had the management team in place, once they had this new, I wouldn't call it identity per se, but they had this new idea about how they were going to make the team operate, they then fixed the coaching roster. Now, that obviously means hiring Dan Campbell, but let's understand something. The freaking coaching roster overall has been remarkably steadfast. It has been remarkably consistent over the last 3 years. The only real area that there's been a lot of turnover has typically been in the defensive positioning groups, which is that defensive line and defensive backs. Other than that, the rest of the roster has remained remarkably consistent. The only large change that has happened since Dan Campbell has taken over was when we fired Anthony Lynn and then Ben Johnson became the offensive coordinator. Otherwise, same defensive coordinator, same special teams coordinator, and most of the other position groups have had the same coaches for the last 3 years. So, remarkably consistent. And then we actually fixed the actual roster once we had the coaches in place. And that's when we made the trade for Jared Goff. And then we made all the draft picks that we had, which was Sewell, McNeil, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Hutchinson, Kirby Joseph, Gibbs, Laporta, Branch, Terrion Arnold, Jack Campbell, all of those guys. And then we had guys that we picked up in free agency and we made other trades for, like, freaking Carlton Davis, Montgomery, DJ Reader. We brought Graham Glasgow back. We got in Alex Anzalone. All of these guys factored into the roster actually being fixed. So, okay, I just summed up a 3-year process in literally like a minute and a half. However, though, having done that, we still have to realize that once we actually started this whole process in 2021, as the saying goes, Rome was not built overnight. Rome was not built in a day. You had to take the process and you had to take it step by step because admittedly, in 2021, when this whole thing got started, the Lions were still a terrible team, and justifiably so. We went 3-13-1 that year. However, despite the team being bad, that didn't mean that we didn't lack for things such as effort. We didn't lack in grit. We didn't lack in determination. And that word, grit, has become pretty much the word that symbolizes what we are here in Detroit. We are a gritty, tough team. We are not going to let anything, how should I say it? We're not going to let anything get us down, even when the things go bad for us. And the Lions have maintained that all the way to present day, that feistiness, that ability to fight, that ability to not give up, that determinant factor that we are always going to give our best shot. We are always going to put our best foot forward. And so that mindset has allowed us to have a rallying point, if you will, going into 2024 and beyond. Now, some people have looked at this mindset and they have called it a villain mindset. This got started back in 2023 when CD Deuce kind of got in here. And some people have, kind of held on to that. Some people have been like, nah, let's kind of move away from that. But the point of the matter is that whether it's because we want to call ourselves villains or we want to call ourselves what I also like to view us as underdogs, it still remains the same. We have this mindset, we have this viewpoint that it's like, listen, we still do not believe that we're getting the proper respect. We still do not believe that we are held in the same light as teams like the Chiefs, like teams like all these others that get all the mad props and mad kudos from all the analysts on freaking all these national TV shows. Now, some people might be like, well, David, where exactly are you getting this from? Because who in the hell actually thinks the Detroit Lions are underdogs? Or better yet, the other question is, why would the Detroit Lions themselves still think that they're underdogs? Well, here's the reason why. Let's think about this, folks. The reason why the Lions might view themselves this way, and the reason why I think they view themselves this way, is because nobody actually thinks that they are long-term legitimate contenders. Now, understand what I said there. Long-term. Because this is why this is going to kind of be a little bit controversial here, because some have stated that at least this year, or at least for the short time period, they could be considered contenders. But when you start talking about, hey, are the Detroit Lions going to become a new power in the entirety of the NFL over the next, 10, 15 years? Ain't nobody saying that. And the reason why they're not saying that is because of two main reasons. The first reason is because of the fact there are some NFL analysts that have taken a look at the fact that the Lions handed out $444 million worth of new contract money this offseason to Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, and Jared Goff. Now, obviously, nobody's, bashing on St. Brown's deal or Sewell's deal. The one that they constantly go after is Jared Goff's deal, which was a $212 million contract over 4 years. The main point I'm trying to bring up with all of this is that some people are looking at all that money the Lions just paid out, and they're thinking that it's going to have consequences later on down the road with trying to maintain the roster's integrity. Okay, that's one point. The other point that people have brought up as why the Lions might not be considered long-term contenders is because of what's actually going on in the division that we're in, the NFC North division. Everybody's looking to the fact that, hey, the Packers, it looks like that they have found their next guy with Jordan Love. It looks like they've got a roster around him. It looks like they're getting set for yet another run to be successful over the next however many years. And now everyone's taking a look at the Chicago Bears with Caleb Williams and the fact that they've got this great offensive looks on paper and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So now you got people that are like, well, the Lions are going to have a lot of competition just within their own division to win the division, let alone trying to go to the Super Bowl. So it's like, okay, you've got two reasons there why analysts are looking at the Lions' ability to be long-term legitimate contenders as putting some doubt on the whole situation. But here's why I believe that Lions take a look at this and they're like, oh, you still doubt us. And this is why I believe that this whole thought process that people have presented, it's faulty reasoning and it has meritless propositioning, in regards to the actual facts of the situation. First and foremost, let's talk about the fact of the handing out of the massive contracts here and how somehow that's going to cause an issue with the roster integrity later on down the road. Who's the guy that handed out the contracts? That was Brad Holmes. Brad Holmes has never, ever once put this roster, put this team in a position of danger. Let's just think about it, folks. Ever since Brad Holmes has gotten here, Brad Holmes' draft record has been damn near immaculate. There has been very few instances where I can take a look at Brad Holmes' draft record and say, yeah, that was a total flub. That was a total failure on his part as a GM. And to be entirely honest, I can't even think of one that looks like that. But there are ones that definitely have question marks. But Brad Holmes has done a great job as a drafting GM. But then when you take a look at how well he's managed the roster over the last 3-4 years, he has done absolutely a stupendous job. Think about it. When Brad Holmes came in 2021, there was nothing to work with. The Lions had no cap space. They had to rebuild the roster from a damn skeleton. And in 3 years, look at where we're at. We are now one of the best teams in the entirety of the NFL. Now, obviously, Brad Holmes did not do that all on his own. He had guys like Chris Spielman helping him out. Obviously, Dan Campbell was there. Obviously, they had all their scouts. Obviously, there was a bunch of people that was in this process. But this is what I'm trying to say. If you honestly think that just because Brad Holmes handed out all those contracts, that's all of a sudden going to be a mismanagement of the roster and a mismanagement of the salary cap, that's going to be the reason that the Lions are not going to be legitimate contenders, you're foolish. You're crazy. Brad Holmes knows what he's doing, and Brad Holmes would never put the team in long-term jeopardy for any reason. So I have no doubt in my mind that the Lions are going to be fine in that department. That's number one. Number two. Let's just think about this from the perspective of Dan Campbell now, shall we? Dan Campbell has done something here in Detroit that no other head coach ever, in my opinion, has ever been able to do. And that is actually instill a legitimate culture that is indigenous to Detroit. Think about it. The cultural mindset that the Lions have is all about hard work. It's all about great work ethic. It's all about team. Well, think about it. That culture has played into how these players work within the team and then work with the management. Because the whole process has been, hey, if I go out and I do my job, I work hard, then you're going to get paid. Think about it. What did the Lions do this offseason that absolutely sent that message? They paid their top players. They paid Amon-Ra St. Brown a massive contract. They paid Penei Sewell a massive contract. They paid Jared Goff a massive contract. What they clearly did there is they showed not only the Lions players that are on their roster that, hey, if you play hard, if you do your job well, you're going to get paid. They showed the rest of the NFL that. It's like, hey, we're not stingy here. If you do your job, you are going to be well taken care of. And then what that also shows is that the players have bought into the culture. Well, the culture of hard work is all about team. It's all about doing what is best for the team. It's having a team mindset. It's not out of self, and it's not just for money. Let's call it for what it is here, folks. Penei Sewell, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jared Goff, if they went out on the free agent market, they would have gotten much more money than what they probably got from the Detroit Lions. And in fact, the players themselves have said, listen, it wasn't about money when we got paid. It was about, hey, we want to do what's best for the team, but at the same time, make sure that we are paid at least a decent amount. Those are the facts. So again, the Lions have instilled a culture that is not only team-friendly, but it's one that players have bought in hook, line, and sinker because they already love not only what Dan Campbell is doing, but they can see the results on the field, and they're now seeing what the management team is doing for those that have done the jobs that they were supposed to do. So, to think of the Lions as not long-term legit contenders or just a flash-in-the-pan contender is purely nonsense. Because again, when you take a look at what Sheila, Chris, Brad, Dan, all these guys have done, and all these other people have done, they have worked long and hard to ensure that not only is the team and organization stable, but it's also sustainable. Now, this is where I'm going to get into the fact that the rest of the NFL doesn't view the Lions as legitimate long-term threats is why the Lions are going to be coming to take over the NFL hierarchy. Because think about it, folks. One of the things that I know the Lions are all about right now is they feel like they have been completely just ignored for the longest time. And that now that they've started to get some recognition, it's like, okay, we recognize the Lions are a good team now. But do we really think that they're actually serious contenders? Not really. It's kind of like, well, we're going to keep you in the conversation just out of respect for what you've done, but we already know who's most likely going to go to the Super Bowl. We already have a pretty good idea who's going to win the Super Bowl. And the fact that the Detroit Lions are like, oh, you guys think we aren't serious contenders. You guys don't think that we actually have the potential to not just win a Super Bowl, but win multiple Super Bowls, actually become a dynasty. There are very few people that have actually talked about the Lions like that. Most people look at the Lions as just like, hey, they're a good team. They're a team that's going to make a push in the late playoff rounds. But actually winning a Super Bowl, we still don't buy into that one just yet. And that's because of the long-standing stigma against the Lions. But let me tell you something here. That doubt, while it might irritate a fan like me, I know this for a fact. Campbell, Holmes, the rest of the people in that organization, they use it to feed the very monster of the Detroit Lions that Campbell and Holmes have grown and nurtured. Think about it, folks. When the Lions are doubted, when the Lions are underestimated, that is when they play their absolute best. And we've heard guys like Jared Goff say it. We've heard guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown say it. We've heard guys like Hutchinson say it. They all say the same thing. Just keep doubting us. We're totally fine with that. All it does is add more fuel to our fire. Well, the more you count the Detroit Lions down and out, the better they play. And the facts are in the pudding. Think about it. All of 2021, the Lions were doubted. And I would argue up until Thanksgiving of 2022, the Detroit Lions were doubted. A lot of people didn't think the Lions had fully actually turned the corner. But when you think about it, when the Lions went toe-to-toe with the Bills on Thanksgiving in 2022, that's when things actually started to kind of turn around a little bit. But think about what had happened prior to that point. In 2021, I already said the Lions were not a good team. But one thing we as Lions fans already know is that the Lions were great at beating the spread. But here's what most people probably don't know. The Lions were not just great at beating the spread in 2021. They have been great at beating the spread every single damn year under Dan Campbell. In 2021, they were 10-7 against the spread. There were only two other losing teams as far as actual record in the NFL in the regular season that had a winning record against the spread. So that's pretty damn impressive. And the fact of this is as well, the Lions being 10-7 against the spread, that was 4th best that year. Then you want to know what happened in 2022? They got even better. The Lions were 12-5 against the spread. And then in 2023, they went again 12-5 against the spread. In 2022, they were ranked 2nd in the league in that category. And in 2023, they were number 1 in that category. That right there ought to tell you something. When Vegas has betted against them, or when Vegas has set the spread, the Lions always go better than what the spread is. They're always proving the doubters wrong when it comes to the financial aspect. That's just one area I could quantify that as. But also think about how in 2022, the Lions had to overcome extremely long odds and extremely slow start to finish strong. There's only been one other time in the NFL history books where a team has started as slow as the Detroit Lions did and actually made the playoffs. And that was the 1992 Chargers where they started 0-4 and made the playoffs. As we already know, the Lions nearly topped that accomplishment by starting 1-6. They then finished with a 9-8 record and barely missed the playoffs by going 8-2 in the final 10 games. And during that 1-6 run, there were people that were calling for Dan Campbell to be fired. There were people wanting to restart the whole process over again. But what did Sheila do? She had a press conference, a very rare press conference mid-season, where she stated her faith in the process. She stated her faith in Campbell and in Holmes. And no sooner did that press conference get done, the Lions started just rolling off wins. And think about this. Not only did the Lions have an extremely slow start in terms of the record, by week 5, the Lions had lost 5 players to IR. And at the end of the season, there were 12 Lions players on IR in 2022. In fact, according to Football Outsiders for 2022, the Lions had the 6th most injured roster. And yet they still nearly got into the playoffs, and they finished with a plus 500 record. That's impressive. So what I'm trying to point out there is despite all the Lions that were, despite all the people that were out on injured reserve, despite all the people that were trying to doubt the Lions still had a shot to get into the playoffs, and while it didn't happen, the Lions did finish 2nd in the division, and they held out the Packers from getting into the playoffs. Very impressive now, isn't it? But what truly makes the Lions a team that you should never, ever, ever underestimate, you should never doubt them, is that, again, going back to the cultural mindset, the grit culture that the Lions have. Think about all the guys that have been put into the Detroit Lions system that have got something on them that embodies this, hey, you keep doubting us, we are going to use that as our fuel. Think about Jared Goff. He was traded, called a bum, called a bridge quarterback. He's had a huge chip on his shoulder ever since. Take a look at Amon-Ra St. Brown, a 4th-round draft pick, had 18 guys drafted in front of him. Huge chip on his shoulder from that. Dan Campbell was called a meathead, called an idiot, that he's not smart enough to be a head coach. I guarantee you, he's got a chip on his shoulder from that. You take a look at Jahmyr Gibbs, you take a look at frickin' Jack Campbell. They were called reaches on draft night when they got drafted. I guarantee you they use that as motivation. Take a look at Brad Holmes. In 2023, he was called arrogant for his drafting. He's been called a whole bunch of things in regards to the whole Jared Goff contract. I guarantee you, Brad Holmes is out there thinking, okay, yeah, I got my receipts. I'm going to hold on to them. Take a look at guys like John Kaminsky, Khalif Raymond, and Brock Wright. Often were overlooked and disregarded by the rest of the NFL as just being, whatever types of pieces for a roster, like their role or depth players. But here in Detroit, they've become big pieces for our roster. Take a look at Jameson Williams. There were quite a lot of people when he first got here that they already were starting to label him as a bust because of, stuff that had happened with him off the field as far as the freaking gambling issues or the freaking firework nonsense. The common denominator is this. Like I said, they all have massive chips on their shoulders. They are all going out to try and prove the doubters wrong. They are tough, they're resilient, and they are not going to let others' opinions try and deter what they think of themselves because they know who they are. They are the Detroit Lions. All of those men and the rest of the Detroit Lions, they have plenty to prove to the doubters and to the detractors. Each one of them has a fire that is fueled by those that have constantly told them that they couldn't do it, they wouldn't be able to do it, they can't hack it, whatever the case might be. That fire is what has maintained the Lions' success story, constantly being doubted. And when you think about it, when the Lions are not given the respect that teams like the Chiefs are getting, or teams like the Ravens are getting, or teams like the 49ers are getting, that right there is something that the Lions, I guarantee you, they are using as motivation. And it's like, okay, we have to go for the heart of the NFL. We have to go for the hierarchy. We have to go where everybody's talking about these freaking teams like they are the greatest thing since sliced bread, and we have to go after them. Because think about it. The Lions, even this offseason, they have been disrespected in a lot of areas. Jared Goff is still not viewed by some people as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Take a look at Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell was viewed less than guys like Matt LaFleur and Jim Harbaugh. And it's like, listen, Harbaugh hasn't even been in the NFL for the last 10 years, and Matt LaFleur, ever since Rodgers left, kind of been whatever. The whole point I'm trying to get at is this. When you combine all of the slights, you combine all of the little sneers, you combine all of the disrespect that the Lions have continued to get, even though they're constantly getting recognition now because you can't, what's the word I'm looking for here? You can't overlook them just because of that. But when they're not getting the respect like other teams are getting, like the 49ers, the Ravens, the Chiefs, because, we don't actually consider you on their level just yet. You're just a really, really good team. You're not legit long-term contenders. The Lions' clear objective is to not only dismantle the NFL powerarchy of those teams I'm talking about, but to, as I have stated in this episode, completely take it over and become the new kings of the NFL. Because think about it. Those teams I talked about, notice how the Chiefs are never counted out, regardless of whatever they may or may not have on their roster. Think about how the 49ers are not even being counted out because of the whole nonsense with Brandon Ayuk. That's what I'm trying to say. The Lions want to make it abundantly clear that they are the number one at the top of the NFL pecking order and for never to be ever doubted again about their supremacy. That is what the Lions are gunning for. And I guarantee you that is their goal going into 2024. Dismantle the NFL hierarchy and to take over with complete supremacy. But anyway, folks, I know this is a long episode, so I'm going to cut it right here because I've been going on for quite a bit. So I just want to say thank you all for watching in another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these three things: like, comment, and subscribe. If by chance you subscribed in the past and forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and you not had a chance to do so, again, highly encourage y'all to subscribe. But I also encourage y'all, please make sure you hit that bell notification icon at the bottom so that way you guys never miss any more content I push out. Also encourage y'all to please share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. And with that being said, to everybody, I hope you all enjoyed the content. I hope you all got something in your life that makes you happy, makes you smile. I hope you all are having a great day. I hope you all are just, doing the best that you possibly can. God bless, and until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.